$45,000. The mountain resort in Banff. The 5-tier cake. The photographer who flew in from Toronto. The string quartet. The open bar for 200 guests. All of it gone. Cancelled. In the middle of my daughter's wedding reception, I stood up, took the microphone, and pulled the plug on everything I'd spent the last 6 years saving for. But before you decide I'm just some bitter old man who destroyed his daughter's special day, before you write me off as vindictive or cruel, let me tell you what led to that moment. Let me tell you my side of this story. My name is Robert Morrison. I'm 64 years old, and I spent 42 years of my life as a pipe fitter here in Calgary. It's not glamorous work. My hands are scarred, my knees don't work like they used to, and I've got hearing damage from 4 decades of industrial noise. But it was honest work. It put food on the table. It paid for a modest 3-bedroom house in Forest Lawn. It put my daughter Sarah through university without a single student loan. My wife, Helen, and we were married for 36 years. She was a home care worker, taking care of elderly folks who couldn't manage on their own anymore. Between the two of us, we never made what you'd call real money. But we were comfortable. We were happy. We had enough. Helen died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, it was stage 4. She lasted 11 months after the diagnosis. Those were the hardest 11 months of my life. Watching the woman I loved waste away. Watching her fight for every single day. Watching her lose. Before she died, Helen made me promise her something. We were sitting in the palliative care unit at the Foothills Hospital, and she took my hand. Her grip was so weak by then, like bird bones. She looked at me with those green eyes that were the first thing I fell in love with back in 1981, and she said, "Bobby, promise me you'll take care of our girl. Promise me you'll make sure she has a beautiful wedding. I won't be there to see it, but you will. Promise me you'll make it special." I promised. How could I not? After Helen passed, I threw myself into work, picked up every overtime shift I could, took side jobs on weekends. I wasn't sleeping much anyway, so I figured I might as well be productive. The house felt too empty without her. Every corner held a memory. Her coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter for months because I couldn't bring myself to put it away. But I had that promise to keep, so I started saving. Every paycheck, I put money aside. I opened a separate account, called it Sarah's Wedding Fund. It became my purpose, my focus. Helen wanted Sarah to have a beautiful wedding, and I was going to make damn sure she got one. Sarah was 22 when her mother died. She took it hard. They'd been close, the way mothers and daughters often are. For a while after the funeral, she'd come by the house every Sunday. We'd order pizza, watch the Flames game, talk about nothing important. Just being together, trying to fill the Helen-shaped hole in both our lives. Then, about 3 years ago, Sarah met Marcus Wellington. I'll never forget the first time she brought him to the house. She was nervous, I could tell. Kept fussing with her hair, checking her phone. When his BMW pulled up in front of my little bungalow, I thought maybe he'd gotten lost, because cars like that didn't usually end up on my street. Marcus was 31, tall, good-looking in that polished way that comes from expensive haircuts and gym memberships. His handshake was firm but somehow felt practiced. He wore a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He said all the right things, complimented the house, asked about my work, acted interested when I talked about pipe fitting. But I caught him glancing around my living room with my worn furniture, my decades-old TV, my shelves full of Helen's ceramic figurines that I couldn't bear to pack away. I saw something in his eyes. Not quite disgust, but something adjacent to it. Calculation, maybe. Like he was cataloging everything he saw and finding it lacking. Sarah seemed happy, though, and that's what mattered. She was smiling more than she had since Helen died. She had energy again, purpose. She'd started working at a downtown investment firm, was climbing the corporate ladder. Marcus had encouraged her to apply there, had used his connections to get her an interview. I was grateful for that. Over the next year, I watched Sarah change. Subtle things at first. She traded her Honda Civic for a leased Mercedes. Started wearing designer clothes, labels I recognized from commercials but had never seen in person. Her Sunday visits became less frequent. Once a month, then once every 2 months. She was busy, she said. Work was demanding. Marcus had a packed social calendar. They were networking, building connections, attending galas, and charity events. I understood. She was building a life. That's what you're supposed to do at 26, 27 years old. I was proud of her success, even if I missed our Sunday pizza nights. Then came the engagement. Marcus proposed at Lake Louise, apparently. Some elaborate setup with rose petals and a photographer hidden in the trees to capture the moment. The ring was 2 carats, maybe more. Sarah called me from the Fairmont Chateau that night, crying happy tears, saying, "Dad, I'm engaged. I'm actually engaged." I was thrilled for her. I really was. And I thought about Helen, about how she would have cried and hugged Sarah, and immediately started planning, how she would have pulled out magazines and Pinterest boards and made lists upon lists. Since Helen couldn't do that, I told Sarah I'd handle everything. "Sweetheart," I said, "your mother and I saved for this. I've been adding to it ever since she passed. Whatever you want for your wedding, you've got it. Don't worry about the cost. This is my gift to you. This is how I keep my promise to your mother." Sarah went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dad, that's really generous. Thank you. That means so much." We met for coffee the following week to start talking about plans. Sarah brought Marcus. They had ideas, they said. They'd been thinking about venues. Marcus suggested the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel. His sister had gotten married there, apparently. It was the only place that made sense for a wedding of this caliber, he said. I looked up the Fairmont later that night. The venue rental alone was $15,000. That wasn't including catering, decorations, anything else. Just the room. I called Sarah. "Honey, maybe we should look at some other options. The Fairmont is beautiful, don't get me wrong, but there are other wonderful places that might be more reasonable." "Dad," her voice had an edge I wasn't used to hearing. "This is my wedding. Our wedding. This is one day. One special day. Mom would want it to be perfect." That stung. Using Helen like that. But she was right, wasn't she? Helen would want it to be perfect. So I said okay. Okay to the Fairmont. Okay to the budget that kept climbing. Okay to the photographer who charged $8,000. Okay to the cake that cost $3,000. Okay to everything. The wedding was set for September, a year and a half after the engagement. That gave me time to save more, to pick up extra shifts, to make it all work. My knees were screaming by the end of most days, but I pushed through. This was for Sarah. This was for Helen. But something started happening in those months of planning. Something I didn't expect. I wasn't included. Not really. Sarah and Marcus would meet with vendors, make decisions, then inform me after the fact. We went with the orchids instead of roses. Hope that's okay. The menu is locked in. They're doing a surf and turf option. We booked the string quartet. They're amazing. I'd asked to come along to these meetings, wanting to be part of the process. And Sarah would say, "Dad, you don't need to worry about these details. We've got it handled. You just focus on, your speech and walking me down the aisle and stuff." Walking her down the aisle and stuff. Like I was just a prop in someone else's production. Then Marcus's parents got involved. Howard and Patricia Wellington from West Vancouver. Howard owned some kind of tech company. One of those startups that got bought by a bigger company for an obscene amount of money. They had the kind of wealth I couldn't even conceptualize. Their house overlooked the ocean. They had a place in Palm Springs for the winter. Patricia wore pearls to brunch. They flew to Calgary to meet me about 4 months before the wedding. Sarah arranged dinner at River Cafe, a fancy spot in Prince's Island Park. I put on my one good suit, the same one I'd worn to Helen's funeral, and tried to ignore how shabby it looked compared to Howard's tailored three-piece. Patricia smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. She asked what I did for a living. "I'm retired now," I said. "Spent 42 years as a pipe fitter. Industrial maintenance, oil and gas sector mostly." "Oh," her smile froze. "How? Industrious." Howard changed the subject quickly, started talking about the wedding, about what an exciting time this was, about how they were thrilled to be joining families. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. Patricia and I would like to contribute to the wedding, of course. We've already spoken with Sarah and Marcus about covering the honeymoon. We're sending them to Bora Bora for 2 weeks, all expenses paid. First-class flights, overwater bungalow, the works. Sarah was beaming. Isn't that amazing, Dad? 2 weeks in French Polynesia? That's very generous, I managed. But inside, something cracked. The honeymoon was supposed to be my gift too. Helen and I had talked about taking Sarah and her future husband on a trip, maybe a week in Hawaii. Modest compared to Bora Bora, sure. But it was supposed to be from us. Howard wasn't finished. We'd also like to upgrade some elements of the wedding. The wine selection, for instance. And we think the reception could benefit from some additional entertainment. Perhaps a band, instead of just the quartet for dancing. These things add up, but we're happy to chip in. The budget is already set, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've got everything covered. Oh, Robert. Patricia's laugh was like wind chimes. That's sweet, but we want this to be truly special. We want to make sure everything is top tier. You understand. Top tier. I repeated the words slowly. What I've planned isn't top tier? Awkward silence. Sarah jumped in quickly. Dad, nobody's saying that. It's just that Howard and Patricia have some wonderful ideas, and since they're offering to help financially, it seems silly not to take advantage of that. Marcus nodded. Think of it as a collaborative effort, Robert. Both families contributing to make this the best day possible. But it didn't feel collaborative. It felt like a takeover. Over the next few months, the Wellingtons' contributions multiplied. They upgraded the floral arrangements. They hired a videographer. They added a cocktail hour before the reception with a raw bar and past hors d'oeuvres. They even changed the menu I'd already approved, opting for a more refined selection that cost an additional $4,000. Every time I objected, Sarah would say, Dad, they're trying to help. Why are you being difficult? Difficult. Me. The man who was draining his retirement savings to pay for most of this wedding. Here's what nobody seemed to understand. I was still covering the venue, the photographer, the cake, the flowers, before they got upgraded, the invitations, Sarah's dress, the rehearsal dinner. The Wellingtons were paying for add-ons, extras, luxuries. But somehow, in the narrative that was forming, they were the ones making this wedding happen. 2 months before the wedding, Sarah came by the house. It was a Sunday afternoon, and for a moment, I thought maybe we'd revive our old tradition. Order some pizza, just hang out. But she didn't take off her coat. She stood in the doorway, fidgeting with her engagement ring. Dad, I need to talk to you about something. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, it's just... She took a breath. The Wellingtons are inviting a lot of people. Like, a lot. Business associates, family, friends. Important people. Okay. And I'm going to need you to. I need you to be careful about what you say, especially during your speech. I stared at her. Careful about what I say. You know what I mean. Don't talk too much about, like, your work or whatever. These people are different. They're from a different world. I just don't want things to get awkward. Different from me, you mean? Dad, don't make this into a thing. I'm just asking you to keep it short and sweet. Toast to the bride and groom. Say something nice. Sit down. That's all. Your mother and I raised you better than this, Sarah. Her face hardened. Mom's not here, Dad, and you don't get to use her to guilt me. I'm trying to build a life with Marcus. His family is important to us. Their connections are important to us. I need you to not embarrass me. Embarrass her. Those words hung in the air like smoke. My daughter, who I'd worked myself to the bone for, who I'd sacrificed everything for, was afraid I'd embarrass her. I think you should go, I said quietly. She left. Didn't even argue. Just turned and walked out. I didn't hear from her for 3 weeks after that. Marcus finally called, playing mediator. Robert, Sarah feels terrible about how things went. She's under a lot of stress with the wedding planning. You know how brides can get. Does she want to apologize? I asked. Pause. She wants to move forward. Focus on the positive. This is supposed to be a happy time. Move forward. No apology. Just sweep it under the rug and pretend my daughter hadn't just told me I was an embarrassment to her new life. I thought about pulling my funding right then. Thought about it hard. But Helen's face kept appearing in my mind, her voice in that hospital bed. Promise me, Bobby. Promise me you'll make sure she has a beautiful wedding. So I kept the promise, kept writing checks, kept showing up to the increasingly rare planning meetings where I was needed only as a checkbook, not as a father. The wedding day arrived, September 23rd. Perfect weather, not too hot, that crisp autumn air that makes the Rockies look especially magnificent. I put on the new suit I'd bought for the occasion. My only concession to vanity, that suit. Charcoal gray, properly fitted. I wanted to look decent, walking my daughter down the aisle. The ceremony was at the Fairmont Chapel. Beautiful space, I'll give them that. Huge windows, overlooking the mountains. 200 guests filled the pews. I recognized maybe 20 of them. The rest were Marcus's world, the Wellington world. I waited in the bride's room while Sarah got ready. She looked beautiful, Helen's pearls at her throat, the only thing in the whole ensemble that connected to our side of the family. Her dress was stunning, $12,000 of silk and lace. I'd paid for it without blinking, even though it cost more than Helen's entire wedding had. You look just like your mother did on our wedding day, I told her. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. Dad, about what I said before. Today's your day, I interrupted. Let's not worry about anything else. We hugged, carefully, so as not to wrinkle her dress. Then the music started, and it was time. I walked her down that aisle, gave her hand to Marcus, sat in the front row and watched them exchange vows. The ceremony was nice, traditional. The officiant said all the right things about love and commitment and partnership. Then it was over, and we moved to the reception. The ballroom at the Fairmont was transformed. Ice sculptures, massive floral centerpieces, string lights everywhere, creating this warm, magical glow. The Wellingtons had spared no expense on their contributions. Everything screamed money and taste and sophistication. I was seated at a table near the back, not at the head table with the wedding party, not at a family table front and center, near the back, with some distant relatives from Helen's side who I barely knew. When I'd asked Sarah about the seating arrangement weeks earlier, she'd said, "Oh, Dad, we're just putting you somewhere quiet where you can relax and enjoy the evening." Quiet, far from the center of things, out of sight. The cocktail hour passed. The meal was served. Every course was perfect, each plate a work of art. I barely tasted any of it. Then came the speeches. The best man went first. Marcus's college roommate, some guy named Braden who worked in venture capital. He told amusing stories about Marcus's rugby days, made jokes about bachelor parties, got good laughs. Then Marcus's father, Howard Wellington, stood up. He tapped his champagne flute with a knife, waited for silence. He smiled that same smile I'd seen at River Cafe, the one that spoke of confidence and control and never having to worry about mortgage payments. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Howard Wellington, Marcus's father. Patricia and I are absolutely thrilled to welcome Sarah into our family tonight. Applause. Smiles. Sarah beaming from the head table. Howard continued, "Planning a wedding is no small feat. It takes vision, dedication, and yes, significant resources." He paused for effect. Patricia and I are honored to have been able to make this celebration possible. When we saw the venue Sarah and Marcus had their hearts set on, we knew we had to do everything in our power to bring their dream to life. My hands clenched around my napkin under the table. From this spectacular setting to the incredible food you've all enjoyed tonight, from the entertainment to the honeymoon we're sending these wonderful kids on tomorrow, Patricia and I wanted to ensure that no expense was spared. Because that's what you do for family. The room erupted in applause. People were standing, toasting the Wellingtons. Patricia was dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Sarah was crying happy tears. Marcus was hugging his father. I sat there, frozen, as 200 people celebrated the Wellingtons' generosity. Nobody mentioned me. Nobody mentioned the $45,000 I'd spent. Nobody mentioned the 6 years of overtime and side jobs and sacrificed weekends. Nobody mentioned Helen's dying wish or the promise I'd kept. In that moment, in that beautifully decorated ballroom with its perfect lighting and expensive champagne, I became invisible, erased, like I'd never existed. Howard sat down to more applause. The MC announced that dinner would continue, then we'd have the first dance, cake cutting, all the traditional moments. But I wasn't hearing any of it. All I could hear was Helen's voice. "Make it special, Bobby. Make sure our girl has a beautiful wedding." I'd kept my promise, and this was what I got in return. Erasure. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I pushed my chair back and stood. The people at my table looked at me, surprised. One of Helen's cousins asked if I was okay. I didn't answer. I walked toward the head table. Each step felt like moving through water, but I kept going. I had to keep going. The MC saw me approaching and his eyes went wide. Marcus noticed next, and I saw confusion cross his face, then something like alarm. Sarah turned in her seat, saw me, and her expression transformed into panic. I reached the head table, reached past the centerpiece and the champagne flutes, and picked up the microphone that had been sitting there unused since Howard's speech. "Excuse me," I said. My voice echoed through the speakers. "I have something to say." The room went quiet, 200 pairs of eyes on me. I saw Howard Wellington's face turn red, saw Patricia's mouth form a perfect O of shock, saw Marcus half rise from his seat. But mostly, I saw Sarah, my daughter, looking at me with absolute horror, silently begging me not to do whatever I was about to do. I almost stopped, almost put the microphone down and walked away and let myself stay erased. But then I thought about Helen, about those 42 years of scarred hands and ruined knees, about every overtime shift and side job, about what dignity meant, and respect, and truth. "For those who don't know me," I began, echoing Howard's earlier words, "I'm Robert Morrison, Sarah's father." Some people nodded. Most looked confused about why I was interrupting the reception. "I want to thank Howard Wellington for that lovely speech about making this wedding possible. Very moving, very generous." I paused. "There's just one small problem with it. Most of it isn't true." Gasps. Actual audible gasps from the crowd. Sarah stood up. "Dad, please don't do this." "The Fairmont venue?" I continued, my voice stronger now. $15,000. I paid for it. The photographer who's been documenting this beautiful day. $8,000. Mine. The flowers, the cake, Sarah's dress, the invitations, the rehearsal dinner we had last night at Alloy. All of it came from my account. $45,000 total. "Robert, this is completely inappropriate," Howard started, but I cut him off. "You want to know what the Wellingtons paid for? The upgrade to the wine selection, the raw bar at cocktail hour, the extra dessert options, the honeymoon, the add-ons, the luxuries. Important contributions, sure, but let's be clear about who made this wedding happen." The room was silent now. Deathly silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. My wife, Helen, died 6 years ago. Before she passed, she made me promise to give our daughter a beautiful wedding. So I worked. I saved. Every dollar I put aside was for this moment, for this day, for Sarah. I looked at my daughter. She was crying now, but not happy tears. Tears of shame, maybe, or anger. I couldn't tell. I did all of that because I loved my daughter, because I wanted to keep my promise to my wife, because that's what fathers do. My voice cracked slightly, but somewhere along the way, I became an embarrassment. My work wasn't good enough. My stories weren't refined enough. I wasn't sophisticated enough for this new world my daughter was entering. "Dad, stop," Sarah whispered, but I heard her through the microphone, so I was put at a table in the back. I was told to keep my speech short. I was erased from the narrative of this wedding while someone else took credit for my sacrifice, for Helen's sacrifice. I set the microphone down on the table, reached into my jacket pocket, and pulled out my phone. Found the number I'd saved earlier that week, just in case. Called it right there, with 200 people watching. "Hello, Mountainside Travel? Yes, this is Robert Morrison. I need to cancel a honeymoon package. Confirmation number November Bravo 7, 2-4-9. Effective immediately. Yes, I understand there might be fees. Cancel it anyway." Sarah's scream cut through the room. "Dad, no!" I hung up, made another call. Bella Vista Strings? Robert Morrison. I need to cancel your services for this evening. Yes, I know you're already here. Yes, I'm aware of the contract. Bill me for the full amount, I don't care. You're done for the night. Marcus was on his feet now. You can't do this. You signed contracts. I sure did. My name is on every single contract for this wedding, which means I have every right to cancel whatever I want. One more call. Pacific Images Photography? Need to cancel the rest of tonight's coverage. Yep. Robert Morrison. You can pack up your equipment. No. Keep what you've shot so far. That's fine. But we're done. I ended the call and looked around the room. At the shocked faces. The whispered conversations starting. The absolute chaos I'd just created. Then I looked at Sarah. Really looked at her. I loved your mother more than anything in this world. And I love you just as much. But love doesn't mean letting myself be erased. It doesn't mean accepting disrespect. Your mother wouldn't have wanted this wedding at the cost of my dignity. You're ruining everything, Sarah sobbed. No, sweetheart. I'm just deciding I won't pay for my own humiliation anymore. You want the Wellingtons' world? You want their money and their connections and their sophisticated life? Then let them fund it. All of it. I pulled out my wallet, took out every bill I had, maybe $300. Set it on the head table. That should cover my meal and drinks. I don't want anyone saying I didn't pay my way. Then I walked out, past the shocked guests, past the Wellington family, past the wedding coordinator who was frantically trying to figure out what to do. Out of the ballroom, through the lobby, into the September evening. My truck was in the parking lot. Same F-150 I'd driven for 15 years. I climbed in, started the engine, and drove away from the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, away from the wedding, away from the daughter who'd decided I wasn't good enough for her new life. I drove the 90 minutes back to Calgary in silence. Didn't turn on the radio, just drove, watching the mountains disappear in my rearview mirror. When I got home, I sat in my truck in the driveway for a long time, staring at the little bungalow Helen and I had bought in 1989, the house where we'd raised Sarah, the house full of memories and worn furniture and ceramic figurines. I thought about Helen, about whether she'd be proud of what I did or ashamed, about whether standing up for myself was worth destroying my relationship with my daughter. My phone started ringing around 10 p.m. Sarah's number. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. Voicemails piled up, but I didn't listen to them. Marcus called. Blocked. Numbers I didn't recognize. Blocked them all. I sat in my living room, in the armchair where Helen used to read her novels, and I thought about dignity, about respect, about what it means to love someone who's embarrassed by you. The calls eventually stopped. The house was quiet. Just me and Helen's ceramic figurines and the life we'd built together. I don't know how the rest of the wedding went. I don't know if they found a new photographer or convinced the quartet to keep playing. I don't know if Sarah and Marcus still went on their honeymoon, though I assume the Wellingtons arranged something. I don't know if I did the right thing. What I do know is this. I spent 42 years breaking my body for honest wages. I spent 6 years honoring my wife's dying wish. I gave everything I had to give my daughter the wedding she wanted. And when I was erased, when I was made invisible, when my sacrifice was attributed to someone else's generosity, I chose my dignity over their approval. Maybe that makes me petty. Maybe it makes me vindictive. Maybe I ruined the most important day of my daughter's life. Or maybe I just remembered, finally, that I'm worth more than being hidden at a back table. That my 42 years of scarred hands and ruined knees count for something. That Helen's sacrifice and my promise count for something. I sleep okay at night. My conscience is clear. I kept my promise to Helen. I gave Sarah a beautiful wedding, or at least most of one. What happened after that? That was her choice. She chose to be embarrassed by me. She chose to let the Wellingtons take credit. She chose to value appearance over truth. I just chose not to finance it. It's been 3 weeks now. Sarah hasn't called. Marcus sent one email, very professional, very terse, outlining the financial and emotional damages my stunt caused. I deleted it. The Wellingtons probably tell the story differently at their country club brunches. Poor Sarah, stuck with that awful blue-collar father who ruined her wedding. How embarrassing for her. I go to work at the co-op on Tuesdays and Thursdays now, volunteering in the tool library, teaching young guys how to properly maintain equipment, how to do basic repairs. They listen when I talk. They ask questions. They treat me with respect. I have coffee with my old crew from the pipe-fitting days every Friday morning at Tim Hortons. We tell the same stories, laugh at the same jokes. Nobody's embarrassed by anyone's profession. Nobody's trying to be something they're not. I'm thinking about selling the house. Maybe. Getting something smaller. The memories here are good, but they're also heavy. Helen everywhere I look. Sarah's childhood bedroom still decorated like she's 15. Or maybe I'll stay. Keep the figurines right where Helen left them. Keep the house as a reminder of what we built, Helen and I. A life based on honesty and hard work and real love. Not the kind of love that requires you to pretend you're someone else. Not the kind that asks you to minimize yourself so others can shine brighter. Not the kind that treats $45,000 and 42 years of labor as something to be hidden and replaced with a prettier story. I promised Helen I'd make sure Sarah had a beautiful wedding. I kept that promise. Everything after that was just me remembering I deserve respect too.